You said that when we take an apple here, like the apple in my hand, and we turn it into this thing in my hand, this apple juice,
right?
The harm is that they're removing the fiber. Why does that matter?
So everyone thinks that fiber is the stuff you throw in the garbage after you've juiced the fruit. We were told forever that the juice had the essential vitamins and minerals, like the vitamin C or the lycopene if you're a tomato. And that's true, they do. But turns out the fiber is essential. It's just not essential for you. It's essential for your bacteria. It's essential for your microbiome. That's what your bacteria want to eat. You have to feed your microbiome. You know, we always say when women are pregnant, you're eating for 2. Well, we're always eating for 100 trillion. Okay? The 100 trillion are in our intestine. And what you feed them matters. Because if you feed them well, you will have what we call bacterial diversity, and you will not have any one species overwhelming any other species, and that will actually contribute to metabolic health. It will allow for the barriers in the intestine to work properly, the mucin layer, the tight junctions, the immunologic barrier called the Th17 cells. Your intestine will present the appropriate barrier so that bad stuff in your intestine won't get into your bloodstream to cause systemic inflammation. So feeding your gut is job 1. And what does your gut like to eat? It likes to eat fiber. Now, we humans don't have the enzymes to digest fiber. You need specialized enzymes. The bacteria have them. So the fiber is the food for the bacteria. When you take the fiber out of the food, you're starving the bacteria. Now, how many grams of fiber are we supposed to eat every day? Our ancestors ate between 50 and 100 grams of fiber a day. The USDA says we're supposed to consume 25 grams of fiber per day. How many grams do we actually consume here in America? And by the way, UK is the same. Mean 12. So we're getting half the amount the USDA says and 1/4 the amount our ancestors did. And the question is, does it matter? And the answer is, oh yeah, it matters big. Because what happens is when you feed fiber to the bacteria, you get multiple species instead of one that basically crowd out all the others. Okay? And you get this metabolic biodiversity, and it basically improves your metabolic health. In addition, the bacteria will chew that soluble fiber up into a compound called short-chain fatty acids. Acetate, propionate, butyrate, valerate. Butyrate is particularly helpful. It is an immune suppressant. It keeps your immune system in check. It's one of the reasons that COVID was worse for people who were obese and who had pre-existing conditions like metabolic syndrome, and also, of course, minority populations, because of ultra-processed food consumption and lack of fiber, lack of short-chain fatty acids, therefore lack of ability to fend off foreign invaders because their immune systems were not tamped down.
Where did the fiber go?
They took it out.
Why?
Because you can't freeze fiber. So that apple, okay?
Yeah.
Okay? Your homework assignment for tonight,
Yep.
Take that apple and put it in your freezer overnight. Take it out in the morning, put it on the kitchen countertop, let it thaw, try to eat it, see what you get.
What am I going to get?
Mush.
Oh, really?
Now, why does that turn it into mush? The ice crystals that form will macerate the cell wall and let all the water rush in.
Okay.
Okay, turn it into mush. Food industry knows that. So what do? Squeeze it and freeze it. Now it lasts forever. Now you've got apple juice or frozen concentrated orange juice. You have taken a fruit, which is food, and you have turned it into a commodity. storable food, which you can sell on the commodities exchange because it won't go bad. So it has a price, and that price will fluctuate, and you can then bet on the commodities exchange. But you can't sell fruit like that because it'll go rancid by the time you've sold it anywhere.
So all these people are doing this to us. What responsibility do I have on a personal level? Because, if these the big companies with all this money, trillions of dollars, they're all manipulating me, bastardizing my food.
Indeed.
They're hacking my brain, giving me these adverts.
Yep.
It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, listen, I'm a victim here.
Well, you are, because you've been hacked. As we started this, the podcast. Okay, you've been told one thing and the real world is actually something else. Okay, you've been hacked. You've specifically been hacked with the notion that processed food is food. Everyone thinks that because they called it processed food. Maybe they shouldn't call it processed food. Maybe they should call it processed nutrients, because the stuff that's in it are nutrients, but it's not food, because it doesn't do what food does, which is contribute to growth or burning. So the question is, what's your responsibility and what's society's responsibility? So this is a very important question, and it's a question, that comes up all the time. Personal responsibility. Does it exist? Well, in order to exercise personal responsibility, first you have to exercise free will. That's a prerequisite. So we can get into this, and we probably would need about 6 hours. Okay, and we don't have it. But do we have free will? Yes or no?
Well,
complicated question.
It's a complicated question, and it's one I've actually been researching this week, funnily enough, for a different project that I'm working on.
Okay.
And I was trying to get to a point where I had a solid answer. Now, there's a couple of schools of thoughts here. One school of thought, when we look at the neurological processes, might suggest, and there's some early studies that suggest, that we have much less free will than we assume, because things happen in our brain before we make a decision. There's some studies that... But do we have free will to make our own decisions? I think we have a lot less free will than we think.
We have very little free will, if at all. Here's the best way to think of it. Arthur Schopenhauer, famous German philosopher, famously said, you are allowed to do what you want, but you are not allowed to want what you want. Those things are actually predetermined. So you have choice in whether you want the candy bar or the ice cream, but you don't have choice about the fact that your nucleus accumbens is raging, saying, give me sugar. That's the choice. The choice is how you satisfy the biochemical drive. But the biochemical drive is way beyond free will. So the question is, if you don't have free will, how can you exercise personal responsibility? Because that's a prerequisite in order to be able to do that. Because personal responsibility says, take the risks, suffer the consequences. But if you can't control the risks or the consequences, how can you exercise personal responsibility? I have just shown you that the behaviors associated with obesity, the gluttony and the sloth, are actually secondary to the biochemistry, which you have absolutely no control over. In fact, we have no ability to be able to mitigate that, and that's why we have this obesity pandemic, and diet and exercise hasn't solved it for just that reason.
So who do we need to point the finger at? Who needs to resolve the issue?
Well, it has to be resolved at several levels. It has to be resolved for the public. That's why you and I are doing this podcast now, because they have to understand